welcome back to the channel. If you are a DIYer, crafter, or just a thrift enthusiast like I am, I have a fun video for you today. So in today's video, I ran across a sale of new purchase goods. So sometimes you just add the new purchase goods into your home and it's all good, or you resell them and it's all good. But sometimes new purchase goods can be a little rough and they can be a little blasé, and I can just envision making them a little bit better. Plus, I also have a passion for old patinas. So a lot of these items are going to be getting the old patina type of look, that aged, worn, well-loved look.
So would you look at new purchase goods and you think, well, I'm going to pass these by because the blasé, rough and textured, they don't really have that resell kind of look that I'm looking for? Or would you look at them going, well, I think I can make them better? And not that this sheep sign isn't everything already. It's just MDF board. It is just paper on MDF board. So what can you do with that? What would you do with that? Well, I know exactly what I would do with that. I'd break out my sander and I'd start giving some of that aged, that worn look. So I just have some 220 sandpaper on my orbital sander, very gingerly. You don't want to go crazy because y'all, I told you this was paper that's just glued on there. But I want to make it look like it has been worn off with time. So just doing that little distressing on all the edges very carefully, very gingerly. Like I said, you don't want to go crazy because the next thing you know, you might have too much paper off. And yes, I'm going to go over the entire piece of paper. I'm not going to like push down on that sander and just make it go to town. I'm just going to let it glide across, just aging some of that paper. Now that I have it sanded the way that I wanted, all those edges a little bit over the entire piece, I'm using antiquing glaze as some dirt. It has some patina, as some aging. So not necessarily is it going to like really change the color. It's just going to add that slight color change. So I'm just going to start off by adding it on to where I distressed all the edges and then just kind of slightly blend it in on the entire piece. So the edges will be darker, like that's where somebody's hands had holded this piece a million times to give it that worn look. Now I'll just take a rag and then I will just blend it in. See how we're like, I sanded it and some of the very porous paper is showing through. That's what's going to pick up that patina. That's what's going to look like it's not just a manufactured piece. If you watched my channel long enough, you know that I always say do worry about your backside. Make your backside look just as pretty as your front. So I am just using some Fusion's clear wax, and then I'm just kind of sealing. The wax is going to add age to the back of this MDF board. And it's also going to add a protection. If you know anything about MDF board, if MDF board gets wet, it gets ruined. It swells. It doesn't age well when it gets wet by any means. So this is just going to seal that piece in and give it a lot more protection. So next up, these aren't quite as simple. I love little stools like this. They are great risers, they're great plant stands, they're great for decor. And they had 4 of them, so heck yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and take all 4, thank you, please. But the texture, oh my gosh, the texture, it is just rough and like I think you could use it as sandpaper. It is so rough. And I don't know what the paint job is. The paint is like they almost took like a spackling tool and just spackled the paint on. So we are actually having 80 grit on our orbital sander, and I am just going to town trying to get this as smooth down as I possibly can. It'll still be that perfectly imperfect. I'm not going to take it all the way down, just so when I go to touch it, it is nice and smooth. And I'm going to try to do all the areas that I possibly can with the orbital sander, but there's always going to be those areas I'm going to have to go in and hand sand. Yeah, it's just a really rough texture. And a couple of them actually had the nails that were sticking out. So, not an easy process at all trying to get my nips in there to snip them off, but I did my best. I did not want to leave that sharp piece of metal for anybody to get cut on. So I just needed to do the field test. I just needed to feel all over the piece. It may not look like it's smooth, but it is, y'all. Even the very bottom of those legs, they needed sanded too. So any area I could, I did. It's like 100% better than what it was when I first bought them. But we are definitely going to be doing a color change, and I love the chippiness that I can get from Sweet Pickens Milk Paint. So we are going to be using that. I'm using the color Basil, but I'm going to mix a couple colors. I did a table recently where I mixed a few of the colors together, and it's just that old-timey color that is just a beautiful green. With the Basil, I did Pantry Door and In the Pickle. If you have not tried milk paint before, it is a powder as you saw, and then you mix in equal parts water, give or take, whatever the consistency you're looking for. You mix it up for 2 minutes and then you let it sit off to the side until it thickens. Just figure out what works for you. I just recently got this brush from the Painted Heirloom. I love the new brushes that I've been using. I link them down below. And when I first got this brush, I thought, oh my gosh, that is such a long handle. I'm not going to need the long handle. That is such a laugh, because actually to do this item right by painting the bottom also, I did need a long handle. So what do I know? They always say if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And that's what he said. He probably was like, hey, you do need that. You don't even know it. And I always seem to start off a project with forgetting to put my Lazy Susan so I can easily spin my item around. So, yeah, there's that. You think you're all prepared, but are you really? I'm painting an item. I really try to get all those hard to reach areas, why it's flipped upside down. I don't want to forget any pieces apart, so I usually will always start off from the bottom and then just keep going around, because you're like, okay, there's 4 sides, and the next thing you know, you move on to another side and you're like, oh, I forgot that one side piece. And especially that underneath, there's something different. Even though I'm painting the entire piece and I'm going to distress the entire piece and I'm going to be sanding the entire piece, there is something about getting all your paint in on every one of the areas. So I'm going to be keeping on with this piece. There's no setting this piece off to the side to let it dry. I'm going to use a heat gun to help me dry it. I need to put 2 coats to really achieve that chippiness, flakiness, crackle, hopefully. Now, milk paint is unpredictable. This is a raw wood. It may just soak in. It may not do any sorts of crackling. And if you want a paint that is going to be predictable, this is probably not your paint. But I love that unexpected. I love the perfectly imperfect, that it's just like a here and there. It may not. I can try to help it along with the heat gun and see what we get. I know it's hard when you see that first crackling. You could just stop and you could just do the one coat if you want, but I always go ahead and do 2, kind of glue it back down, kind of sort of, because that was a big crackling going on there, and then just keep on working with it and put that second coat, get that heat gun out and see what we have. So sometimes it will chip, it will crackle, it will, it'll just do what it does. It will peel. It may peel to the raw wood. It may peel just to the first layer of paint. but that's how paint ages in itself, so it's perfect. So now I'm going to go ahead and we are going to sand it. I'm going to just use my mouse sander. That was kind of how I sanded some of the areas to get that, I didn't have to use by hand so much. It is a little bit awkward. There is a different motion that a mouse sander does compared to what a orbital sander. Orbital sander goes round and round. A mouse sander just basically just vibrates. So it's just two different items that you're using to distress. So I just really want to bring out that natural wood. I want to get those edges popping, and I just want to get some of that paint off, show a little bit more of that chippiness, and you can see the variation in color where it sanded off to that first layer of paint. And I know when you go to sand the paint off, it can be scary. Yes, I had to go in and use hand sandpaper some. But when you're like, oh no, that came off. But you want it to come off. You want it to look like somebody's used it 1,000,001 times. It's been touched. It's been dirty. It's been just used. It has been a well-loved piece. So for the areas that I can't get the electric sanders in, I will hand sand. And I definitely want to hand sand because I'm going to be waxing this piece. And when I go to wax this piece, if I did not hand sand those areas, the wax is going to take differently. So I want my wax that's going to finish up this piece to take in a nice smooth finish, and the wax on the unsanded areas would be darker than they would on the sanded areas. So there is a reason that you do sand the entire piece. You like to use the air compressor or something to wipe off all the sanding dust, and sometimes it does blow a little bit more of the paint off, and that's perfect. I don't have to worry about that chipping off later. But you do need to seal milk paint in with whatever your choice is. But I like to add a little bit more age. I love black wax, and I am trying out Fusion's wax. There's just something about that black wax that ages that paint. It gives it that, that dirty, that dirty aged, the atmosphere, the touching, there's just something about that black wax that I just love. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe it on the entire piece, and then I'll take a rag with a little bit of the natural wax just to blend it all in. So if you noticed, I only did 2 of the fuller stools because I'm painting the other 2 with Milk Paint's Lantern. I'm doing my bestsellers here, so when I find secondhand pieces and the patina is that green and I don't do anything to it and I put it in my booth, it just sells. And the same thing along with black. So you kind of have to do what sells, and black little riser stools sell just as well as those little green ones. So that is what I'm going to do. So we're going to go through the same process with these other 2. Though the one thing I will change up is I will not add any of the natural clear wax to these black stools. Sometimes, talk about unpredictability, you will get some white residue left behind from the natural, so I choose just to do just the plain black. to find these corbels. Though they're new, they're not old, y'all. These are all new purchase goods. They're still corbels. They're still solid wood. But same like that stool, they're so rough feeling. They're just so, I don't even know. And then that paint job, I don't understand at all. And you would think it's a matching set, but it is, but it isn't. So, first of all, we just need to get as much of this sanded smooth as we can. Okay, so now that I've got these sanded, look at, they're white now. My only guesstimate is like they take a spackling tool, it's some kind of a chalk paint that, and then they just kind of like scrape it on, or it's heavy on the brush, I don't know, and then they stain over it, and then it gives it that aged wood look, I guess. I don't know, they yet again look 100% better, but I want them to be whiter. So we are going to go and we are going to switch paints because I know that this really raw paint is going to absorb in. So I'm going to go ahead and use Fusion's Parchment color. Parchment is a wonderful color. It's not that bright blue white, but it's not that warm, creamy, almost yellowy white. It's just a nice, soft white. When I think of salvaged corbels, for some reason, I just always think of them being white. Now, because this wood is so raw, it is so dry, that's one coat. I don't need to do 2 coats. There's no sense if I'm going to be sanding it. I don't see any brush strokes. I don't see any thin spots or anything like that. So I can, after it dries, just go ahead and start sanding to distress, bringing out some of those features, making it look more aged. As much as I would love the power sander to do all the work for me, there's always detailed areas that need it sanded too, so I have to go back in and get those by hand. But I want to give these more age, and there's nothing like black wax to add dirt to an item. So what I'm going to do is I'm kind of brushing it on where the raw wood is in the hope that it'll absorb into the raw wood. We'll see. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen. But yes, I know you probably would think black on white, that just, oh my gosh, that looks terrible. But once you rub it all in, you can just rub it all in, or like I'm going to do just some natural wax to blend it all in. It just really gives it that aged patina. But you want to make sure that it is blended all in, the entire piece, not just where you put it. You want the entire piece just faded right in, especially where that detailed area is. I don't want just a big clump of black being in there. I want to make sure that I've got that all smoothed out, that there's no brush strokes. So sometimes you need a little bit of extra help taking a dry rag to kind of pull some of that wax off. Well, of course, it's a horse. Yes, I love the textured paint on it, but though I think if you put it on a shelf, it doesn't really pop all that much. So I love the concept. I just want to make it pop a little bit. And it's not a thick metal. I wish it was a little heavier, and I wish that it was a solid piece of wood. There's a lot of wishes here, but it is what it is. So we're going to go ahead and use Sweet Pickens paint in the Zinc, which is a fun gray color. So that's really going to make this horse pop a lot more. So we are going to be doing both sides, and the thing about milk paint is you can just mix up just a little. You don't have to mix up, I mean, just it's equal parts, so just mix up as little as you want. And sometimes it seems to be thicker, sometimes it seems to be thinner. I think that I do equal parts, but hey, who knows? But one coat is going to be enough to cover this. And oh, it just started to chip right off the bat when I added that heat gun. Now that I've done both sides, I'm going to seal the milk paint and automatically seal that chippiness. I'm not worried about that chippiness right now. I'm just going to spray it with a couple coats of the Weather Defense Metal Spray. Oh, I love that chippiness. It's, it's just amazing. But while that is drying, I'm taking some of that black wax, and I tried the Fusion at first. But the Fusion isn't quite as thick as the Jolie's, and it wasn't really like sticking to this very shiny, very smooth surface of the MDF. Well, it's like a balsam wood, basically. It's not a heavy wood, it's not a MDF. But I wanted to shade it in. I really wanted to give some age to the box. So I did switch over to the Jolie's that's a little bit heavier. So every wax, every item you use just has a little bit different, purpose for why you use it. Now I want to actually shade the outer of this image. I'm taking some of the Fusion's coal black paint, and I'm doing a very dry brush technique. I just really want to pop those images. I like the gray, I like how it's all turning out, but I would like to fade it in. So really like concentrating on all the edges, the hooves, the muzzles, the ears, the tails, just really darkening that up, really bringing and popping those features out. And then my one last step is I'm going to use some of the Glidden's Rust Patina on the bar that the horse is standing on. It kind of has some fakey like round paint splatters. The horse had them too, but I just want to fade in and make it look a little bit more old, and just brushing it on and letting it oxidize will do the job. So now I have this stool, which is bigger than the other 4 that I did earlier. And you think, well, it's already black. You said black sold. But there's just something about the black on this stool that doesn't bring out its best features. It's larger in size. It's not... it's just not. So I'm actually going to use the Flour Sack by Sweet Pickens to give it that aged chippy look. So because it's such a large, small stool, kind of hard to use on like a countertop for a riser, I can just envision it like a little side plant stand or something that's sitting on the floor, or something that you can add a little bit more height to, but it just needs to not be the main feature of black, and I think some white chippy paint will do that job. So just like before, I did 2 coats, and now I'm going to add the heat gun to start drying it, and we'll see. Crackles, no crackles, maybe crackles. It just all depends. And sometimes I will use a Mr. Botter, though I didn't show that on camera, just to help smooth anything out. So don't be afraid to add a little bit more water or a little bit more powder. Just figure out what the consistency is that you like to work with. So then after I got it all dry, we're going to go ahead and sand it. So one got chippier than the other, one cracked and chipped off, One just did some wonderful cracking. I got to remember to change my sandpaper out, or I'll have a whole bunch of black on my white paint because this is not sealed in yet. So if I would sand it with that black milk paint, I might have a gray stool here. So I'm remembering to change it out. It's those little things. I thought it would be fun to use some of the Fusion Antiquing Glaze to show you the difference between the black and the brown for adding patina and dirt. Now, what happens when you add glaze, the wax is in, when you crackled, it really just brings out those crackles. And like, see, so one chippied, one didn't chippy, who knows why, but it's unpredictable. But that's how paint would wear off an item anyway, so I'm not worried. I know it'd be very easy to like, oh no, look at that big chip, I need to fix that. Don't fix it, leave it the way it is. So just rubbing that in, and it's nice like when you're using the black wax or the brown glazing, anything like that, to have, if you feel like you got it too dark, why it's still wet, just take some natural wax. It acts like an eraser and tones it right down. Next up is this jumping bunny. What is it about animals on a stand that I am just attracted to? Though I like it in black, but it just isn't popping for me. So since I already had some of that flour sack mixed up, we're going to go ahead and use this on there. Now, if I don't like spray paint this, or I don't use like a bonding agent, like the slick stick on here, I'm really going to get some chippiness. So I'm going to choose just to have cleaned it off and do it as is, because I want it to have that chippy patina. So I'm kind of trying to predict in my head how this is all going to work. So, but remember, milk paint is unpredictable. So just because I think it's going to happen doesn't mean it's always going to happen. And then since this bunny is really just one-sided, I'm only going to paint the front side. If you notice, when I went to dry the first coat, it really started to chip, which means, it's metal. So metal's going to heat up a lot differently than wood. So for my second coat, I did not apply heat. I just let it dry on its own. And then you can see it already started to chip a little bit. That's okay. I want it to chip. But I'm going to go ahead and get it sealed in right now with just one coat of the Weather Defense. I'm going to let that dry. Even just running my hand over it made some of the chippy pieces come off. But I am going to take some sandpaper around the edges and just help that along. I want to make it look even a little bit more worn. I was going for this chipped off look, so it all depends on what you're going for. And so just to make sure that those edges are smooth and it chips off any of that paint. And then after I get that all done, we'll get it sealed in with the final coat of Weather Defense. For my last one is more corbels. These are smaller in size. They're a nice size. They're solid wood, but yet again, they're that rough texture. Dust bunnies and wiping them off would just shred your rag. That's how rough they are. And then the chalk. Oh my gosh. I mean, you know, at first Chris was like, just like spray them and seal them in and it'll be all good. And I'm like, oh no, they need more help than that. They need to be sanded. They need to be sanded smooth. Though not only does the chalk need to mostly come off, but then that texture on that wood needs to be calmed down. And then to me, that almost seems like there's spots of like mold, y'all. I'm serious. I don't know. It's just like water on the chalk paint, and then it just was like humid, and I don't know. Anyway, I'm taking precautions, and this is just good that we are getting that taken care of. And I'm sorry, I had some like little skin cancer burn off my arm, and I keep trying to keep it covered, but it's hard to have your sleeve down while you were you know, working. Again, I'm just going to try to do as much as I possibly can with the power sander. I'm going to round those very harsh edges, trying to get, and it's just a powdery mess. It's almost like it was a bucket of chalk paint and they just dipped it in there, and then and maybe that's what they did. They dipped it in there and they just set it off to dry. But I'm using 80 grit and trying to get as much off as I can, and then the areas I can't get the Oriole sander, my electric sander, I will go in and try to get some more off because it's just really built up. And the bottoms of them are the worst. That's why I said they just dipped it, set it off to the side, and it just pooled on that bottom. Maybe it was just chalk. Maybe it wasn't even chalk paint. What do I know? Because look at how fast it comes right off. And actually, y'all, I bought, what was it? Like, so I'm doing 4 for you on here, but I already had made over 6 others because I'm like, corbels! I was so excited to put corbels in my booth, and already got those painted up with the same technique. So it's the same as I did with the earlier corbels. I'm doing the parchment. I love that color of white. And 1 coat because this wood is really raw. It is just, yeah, you can tell if you need another coat on raw wood, especially when you're distressing. If you like see all the way through it, or if you can see dark and light spots, you kind of know. You just have to eyeball and use your better judgment of what you need to do. So I'm just using a heavier brush here because I really need to get it down into some of those crevices. Yeah. And this just holds a lot of paint, and it's so dry, it's just sucking the paint right in. This final one, I'm just going to switch back to the Jolie's wax. The Fusion Wax is working out wonderful, but I just like to show you a couple different techniques. And the same thing with the black wax. I'm looking for those raw wood spots. I'm looking for that raw wood to absorb in the black to give it that aged patina. So once I get it all on, and then we're going to use some of the clear wax. Look at that big tub of wax. Love it. Love it, because I go through a lot of natural wax. And this is the home. I'll link it all in the description below you. All these, that will be under the Painted Heirloom.
Thank you so much for watching today's video, and what did you think? I told you I love aged, worn out, well-loved patinas. I think I achieved them, and everyone I attempted. That raw wood was just raw. Talk about raw, sharp. Yeah, I didn't even hardly even want to touch it, but we got them softened down, we got them aged. No, I'm not trying to pawn them off and say, oh, they're 100-year-old corbels or little stools. They are what they are. They are made over items, and I absolutely love milk paint, that chippy look that I can achieve with it. It's that perfectly imperfect, and if that's not the look for you, there's other looks. You could just paint a piece of furniture, an item, and just make it look pristine. We all have different tastes, different personalities that we want to bring out in the pieces that we're making over. And the cute little animals, yeah, they were just black. Yeah, that's fine, but it was fun to make the bunny chippy, to make that horse have a lot more personality. And I love each and every one of those chippy stools. And I know that that sheep was a little bit of just paper on MDF board, but why not give it some age and make it look like it wasn't just paper on MDF board? So again, thank you for watching today's video. Let me know down in the comments which of the items that I made over were your favorite. Would you pick up a new purchase good and make it over yourself? And then also, if you're part of our YouTube family, thank you so much. But if you stayed to this end of the video and you're not part of our YouTube family, that means you like this kind of content. So smash that subscription button along with the notification bell so you know we've uploaded a new video. And we will see you next time, guys, and you can see what we're up to. Bye.